There are some stories that leave a permanent mark. They settle in, and they don't leave. Tonight, we're looking at one of those. It begins on Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. A family home burns to the ground.
And when the sun comes up, 5 children are gone. Not just gone from the house, but gone from the world, without a single physical trace.
That's a quote from the children's father, George Sodder. And it really is the entire story in 2 sentences.
It is. This was never just about accepting a tragedy. From the very beginning, for him, the story didn't add up. He wasn't just grieving. He was searching for proof, one way or the other, and he never found it.
So let's go back. Let's place ourselves there. It's the Sodder home. George and Jenny, his wife. They have 9 of their 10 children living with them. The eldest son is away in the army. The house is full. It's Christmas Eve. Everything is as it should be.
It's a scene of perfect, ordinary holiday chaos. The kids are excited. They've opened some presents early. Everything seems normal.
The younger kids, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, they beg to stay up late to play with their new toys. Their mother, Jenny, agrees and goes to bed around 10 p.m., leaving them with the older siblings.
And this is where the timeline starts to get strange. The first odd event happens at 12:30 a.m. The phone rings. Jenny gets up to answer it.
On the other end is a woman she doesn't know asking for a name she doesn't recognize. And in the background, Jenny hears laughter, the clinking of glasses, like a party. She tells the woman she has the wrong number and hangs up.
Just a wrong number. Happens all the time. But the timing is unsettling.
Half an hour later, at 1 a.m., she's woken up again.
This time by a sound. A loud thump on the roof. Like something heavy landed up there. And then a rolling noise.
She goes back to sleep. And then, at 1:30 a.m., she wakes up for the third and final time. This time, to the smell of smoke. George's office is on fire.
The house goes up incredibly fast. It's a timber-framed house, filled with coal dust. George, Jenny, and 4 of the children who slept downstairs get out. John, George Jr., Mary, and Sylvia.
But the 5 younger children, the ones who had stayed up late, their bedrooms were in the attic, upstairs. And when George tries to go back for them, the main staircase is already gone. Just a wall of flame.
There's no way to reach them from inside the house. The only way is from the outside.
So George thinks of the ladder. He always keeps a heavy-duty ladder propped up against the side of the house. He runs to get it so he can climb to the attic window. But it's not there. It's missing.
Not just misplaced, gone. They later find it thrown in an embankment over 75 feet away.
Okay, plan B. George runs to his 2 coal trucks. His idea is to pull one up to the house and climb on top of it to reach the window. He gets in the first truck, it won't start. He tries the second, it won't start either. Both trucks had been running perfectly the day before.
It's one thing after another, a series of failures. Each one on its own could be bad luck, but together, it feels coordinated.
Exactly. They try to get water from a rain barrel, but it's frozen solid. One of the children runs to a neighbor's to call the fire department, but the phone line is dead. They try their own phone, also dead.
They are completely isolated. Every single avenue for rescue or for calling for help has been cut off.
So a neighbor finally gets through to the fire chief by driving into town. But the fire department, they don't show up. Not for hours. The fire started at 1:30 a.m. The fire department was only 2.5 miles away. And they arrived at 8 a.m., 7.5 hours later.
The official reason given was that the chief couldn't drive the fire truck and had to wait for someone who could.
For 7 hours? In a small town? For a house fire? With 5 children trapped inside? That explanation is thin. By the time they arrived, there was nothing left but a basement full of ash and smoking timber.
So in the immediate aftermath, there's this official story that forms very quickly, a tragic accident. But for the Sodders, as they try to process this unimaginable loss, the story just doesn't hold together. The cracks start to show almost immediately.
It's the beginning of their shift from victims of a tragedy to investigators of a crime.
The fire marshal spends maybe 2 hours at the scene before filing his report. 5 days later, death certificates are issued for all 5 children.
And the cause of the fire is officially ruled an accident. Faulty wiring. It's a simple, clean explanation. It closes the book.
For everyone except the family.
Here's the first problem George has with that theory. He'd recently had the entire house rewired by the local power company, and they'd said it was perfectly safe. But even more pointedly, Jenny remembered something specific. As the fire was starting in the office, she noticed the Christmas tree lights were still on. If a wiring short had started the fire, the power to the house should have been cut instantly. The lights shouldn't have been working.
Then there's the phone line. The assumption was that it burned through in the fire, but George had a feeling about it.
He called the telephone company.
And the repairman who came out confirmed it. The line wasn't burned. It had been cut, deliberately, up on the pole, about 14 feet off the ground. Someone had to have climbed up there to do it. That's not an accident. That's an action.
And that action points toward motive. George Sodder was an Italian immigrant. He was also very outspoken in his criticism of Italy's fascist dictator Benito Mussolini. This did not sit well with some members of Fayetteville's Italian-American community.
He'd gotten into heated arguments, he'd received threats. One in particular stands out. An insurance salesman had tried to sign George up for a policy. When George refused, the man warned him that his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed. He specifically said it was because of all the dirty remarks you've been making about Mussolini.
And then, here's the part that's hard to dismiss. That same insurance salesman, the one who made the threat, was selected to serve on the coroner's jury. The very jury that ruled the fire an accident and closed the case.
The person who threatened the family helps officiate the ruling that there was no crime. It's deeply troubling.
As the days and weeks passed, people started coming forward with things they saw that night. A bus driver who passed through town late that night said he saw people throwing what he called balls of fire at the Sodder house.
Which could explain the loud thump on the roof that Jenny heard, an incendiary device.
Another woman who lived nearby claimed that as the house was burning, she saw some of the children peering out of a car that was parked along the road. She saw them drive away.
And the sightings continued. A woman working at a tourist stop between Fayetteville and Charleston swore she served breakfast to the children the next morning. And another witness saw 4 of the 5 children about a week later at a hotel in Charleston, accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, all of whom she described as being of Italian extraction.
But for all the theories and witness statements, the case always comes back to one central physical fact. Or rather, the lack of one. No remains were ever found in the ashes of the house.
Not a single bone fragment. Not a tooth. Nothing. And as an anthropologist from the Smithsonian Institution would later write in a letter to the Sodders, it is very strange that no other bones were found.
That's a profound understatement from a scientific body. It's the core of the entire mystery.
Jenny Sodder couldn't accept the official explanation that the fire had been hot enough to completely destroy the bodies. So she began her own quiet investigation.
She started conducting experiments, burning small animal bones to see what would happen, and she spoke to an employee at a local crematorium.
And he told her something crucial. He said that even when a human body is burned at 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for over 2 hours, the bones don't just disappear. The skeleton remains. Their house fire, an open-air blaze, would have been much cooler and burned for only about 45 minutes before collapsing.
Scientifically, it seems impossible that 5 complete skeletons could be incinerated to the point of leaving no trace. There should have been something left.
Years go by, and then, in 1949, George hears a strange rumor. He's told that the fire chief, F.J. Morris, had found something in the ashes, a heart. But instead of reporting it or giving it to the family, Morris supposedly put this heart into a metal box and secretly buried it right there at the fire site. George confronts Morris, who admits it's true. He leads George to the spot.
They dig up the box. George takes it to a local funeral director for examination.
And it wasn't a human heart. It was a beef liver, and crucially, it had never been exposed to fire. It was completely raw.
Morris's explanation later was that he had planted it there, hoping the family would find it and believe their children had died, giving them some closure.
It's a grotesque explanation. It feels less like a misguided attempt at comfort and more like a deliberate deception, a cover-up. Why plant false evidence?
This discovery prompted George to take matters into his own hands. He brought in a DC pathologist, Oscar Hunter, and excavated the entire basement. He sifted through every inch of debris.
And they found something. Several small shards of what appeared to be bone. They sent them to the Smithsonian for analysis.
The report that came back only made things worse. The fragments were human bone, lumbar vertebrae, but they belonged to a single individual, aged between 16 and 22. None of the missing children were in that age range. The oldest, Maurice, was 14.
And just like the liver, the Smithsonian report confirmed these bones showed no sign of ever being exposed to fire. The conclusion was they were likely part of the fill dirt George had used to turn the basement into a memorial garden after the fire.
So the only human remains ever found at the site didn't belong to the children and were never in the fire. It proved nothing. In fact, it proved the opposite.
After the failed excavation, the case went cold for a very long time. The Sodders put up a large billboard on Route 16 with pictures of the 5 children, offering a reward for any information. It became a local landmark, a constant reminder.
And then, more than 2 decades after the fire, something arrived in the mail. a piece of evidence that was both the most hopeful and the most frustrating of the entire case.
It was 1968. Jenny Sodder opens an envelope with no return address, postmarked in Kentucky. Inside is a photograph. It's of a young man, probably in his late 20s or early 30s.
And he has a striking resemblance to their son Louis, who was 9 at the time of the fire. The same curly dark hair, the same dark eyes. He would have been in his early 30s in 1968. To Jenny, it was him.
On the back of the photo, there was a handwritten, cryptic message. It read, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie." Frankie was the nickname for their oldest son, John Jr. The rest of it is almost indecipherable. Ill boys, and then a series of letters and numbers, A9, 132, or 35. It reads like a code, or just fragmented thoughts, but the mention of Louis by name and his brother, that's so specific.
The family was electrified by this. They hired a private investigator. They gave him the photo and sent him to Kentucky to track down the origin of the letter. And in what feels like the final, cruelest twist in this story, the private investigator went to Kentucky, took their money, and was never heard from again. He vanished. The lead, the photograph, everything, it just evaporated.
The photograph was the last real lead the Sodder family would ever get. After that, all that was left was the waiting.
And the billboard, a public monument to a private grief that never faded and a set of questions that never got an answer. George Sodder died in 1969. He went to his grave convinced his children were still alive somewhere. Jenny lived for another 20 years. After the fire, she wore black every single day for the rest of her life. 44 years. When she died in 1989, the family finally took the billboard down. And just recently, in 2021, the last surviving Sodder sibling who was there that night, Sylvia, the youngest child who escaped, she passed away. The last first-hand memory of that night is gone now.
So what are we left with? No remains, no motive beyond speculation, a series of bizarre sightings that lead nowhere, a deeply compromised official investigation, and a photograph that might be everything or might be nothing. The official story asks you to believe in a fire hot enough to vaporize 5 skeletons, but not hot enough to burn a phone line. It asks you to accept a series of impossible coincidences and a level of staggering incompetence. The alternative asks you to believe in a conspiracy of incredible cruelty, one that involved kidnapping 5 children and was kept silent for a lifetime. Neither explanation sits right. And so, nearly 80 years later, the question is the only thing that remains. What happened to the Sodder children?